Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and our website, samknickerbocker.com. Welcome back to Fuel Your Legacy. And as always, we have some more incredible guests coming on. And today we're actually talking to somebody who has made his millions. He's crushing it in the mobile home park industry. If you ever thought, who owns that trash heap over there? I'm just kidding. His are probably nicer than the average. No, really. So Ryan, he was fed a lie when he was younger, much like probably most of us or you who is listening to this, that if you study hard, graduate from top university, you're going to get a job and everything's going to be hunky-dory and you're going to retire with ease and everything's going to be fantastic. Well, he found out, much like I'm sure you're finding out, which is why you're listening to this podcast, that not everything turns out as advertised. Thankfully, he has rebounded, really got into his rock bottom and launched from that with a solid foundation. And now he's here to help you understand, hey, kind of where did that aha moment happen? How did he launch? And how did he overcome the fear of failure? So I'm super excited, Ryan. Take it away.
Awesome. First and foremost, Samuel, I want to thank you. I'm absolutely flattered to be here. We have a ton to talk about offline because we're both huge fans of reading and writing. I haven't even told you I've written a book, which we can get into again offline. But yeah, I am so pumped to be here. I really am. And I don't have anything to sell. I am literally doing this because I want to help you, the listener, escape corporate America because it is awful. Awful, man. And you know what stinks about it? It's that you're force-fed this line which you hinted at, which is work hard in school, you'll go to a good college, and then from there you'll have a job, and then you work really hard at that job, and then you get to retire. Well, it turns out like quite literally none of that is true. You can work really hard and still not to go to a good school. You can go to a good school, like I went to Wake Forest University, very good school, made the Aunt Becky list. And so, quote unquote, we're elite or whatever, because people, Aunt Becky's of the world, are paying to get their kids in on fake scholarships, right? So, like, good school, not Ivy, but very good school, right?
Good as in
no guaranteed job. Oh my gosh, don't get me started about that. My wife's a huge Full House fan, so I like to trash her for that.
Good,
but it's like, dude, I went to Wake Forest twice. I went once to get for undergrad. I got my degree in psychology and statistics, literally to be a salesman. I wanted to be in sales, and I figured what better way to sell than to understand the psychology of the people you're trying to persuade. And it paid dividends, especially because I got a statistics minor, which also helped me optimize my selling schedule, I literally did Moneyball statistics I was a car salesman. I literally optimized my day based on a whole bunch of data I put together, which is really cool. But long story short, even after graduating Wake Forest and an MBA, I had no guaranteed job coming out of it. And both times going out of undergrad and grad, I found myself stuck at a job where I did not want to get promoted because I hated it and I didn't find any meaning or purpose in it. I found myself not wanting to go up, so not wanting to stay put. And then it's like, well, I'm making too much money here. Where am I going to go? Because I've adapted a lifestyle that has become part of my identity. And it's not just a sunk cost of racking up student loan debt and putting in a bunch of hours and years literally playing the office politics game, but it just becomes part of your identity. It's really, really hard to let that go, especially if you're used to a certain lifestyle, right? So you're living a middle-class lifestyle, you drive a certain car, you go to certain restaurants, you have certain friends. Really hard to let that go. And to give a teaser about where I'm going with this, eventually I gave all that up and moved into a mobile home. to chase my dream. So sacrifice is a big part of where I'm going with this, but to kind of go back so we don't do a huge Quentin Tarantino, it basically, my journey started when I was in, obviously when I was in high school, really, when, even before that, when I decided Wake Forest was my dream school and I really wanted to go. And I did everything I could to get in, and I did. And I had several key moments in my life where I realized if I don't get my stuff together, like I got like a 980 on the SAT, the PSAT. So, and the average at the times, this is when it was based off 1600. Wake Forest average was 1320. I wasn't even close. So I was like, okay, well, we've got to get this score up. And flash forward several years later, from my freshman year to my senior year, I scored a 1320 out of 1600. So I got literally the average SAT score. And then I had slightly above the GPA, and I got accepted into Wake. And it was like a dream come true getting to go to my dream school. And I loved it. And I was following that trajectory, right? Like, hey, go to a really good school. You'll have a really good job when you come out. Well, it turns out I didn't. It turns out I locked a job down. So I graduated in 2009. So you can't be like, well, you just graduated right at the start of the Great Recession. Well, I actually had my job locked up before the economy took a tumble. It was that I picked the wrong job because I didn't know myself well enough. I didn't self-assess well enough to know who I was at heart. So even though I had a psych major and I took a ton of classes that basically browbeat you into trying to come to the realization that you need to understand who you are, what you like and what you do not like, or you will make a decision based on what you think other people want you to do. Whether you realize that or not, whether you're consciously going, well, I'm going to do this because I don't want to make dad unhappy, or you're going, well, no, I really want this, but really, do you really want that, or do you really want the world? So, for example, investment banking, I know a ton of investment bankers that are doing it, quote unquote, for themselves, but really they're doing it because they want to impress other people. So the thing that I came into really, really hard and fast is my dad was a college professor in marketing. He was not a psych person, right? He wasn't there to tell me, hey, you really should figure out, like really drill down into who you are at heart and what you really want to be when you grow up. Because I didn't have that. And so I picked a job that was it was sports sales. And so I was like, oh my God, sports and selling, done, right? This is going to be my life. And it ended up being, I tricked myself into literally taking a telemarketing job, which was horrendous. And then it was like June or July of 2009, after I had graduated, after everyone who just graduated who was going to get a good job got a job. And so I was like, I can't find a sales job because, number one, I have already graduated, right? So I can't re-graduate. And number two, the only people who were hiring business to business sales wanted someone with 5 years of experience and a Rolodex who could roll in day one and be effective. And that was not me. What I needed was someone who was willing to take a chance on me. And thankfully, my karate instructor from high school was a car salesman. He was a manager at Hendrick Honda in Charlotte, and they gave me a chance. And I could have easily been like, I went to Wake Forest University. Car sales is beneath me. I want business to business sales, not business to consumer. But instead I said, you know what? I am not going to sit at my parents' house and feel sorry for myself. I'm going to go and do something and make the most of it. What I ended up doing was I ended up tracking my own data, literally using Moneyball statistics with multivariate regressions to literally optimize my day and figure out who are the best leads to follow up on, which ones can you let go, what part of the sales process is absolutely vital. And what I found during that process, literally just using a basic multivariate regression analysis, is if you can show people numbers for a car, even if they're like, I'm not buying today, your likelihood of selling them jumps from like 25% to 60. So better than a coin flip. So then all of a sudden I craft my entire sales process around how can I convince someone to test drive their car and to just sit down with me for 5 minutes. And it absolutely revolutionized the way I sold cars. And in my first full year, I hit Honda's highest award right out of the gate. I sold 200, I think it was 241 cars. So about 20 cars a month right out of the gate at 24 years old. And I had a moment which they shipped me up to Washington, D.C. for like this, to stay at a 5-star hotel. And it was this weird moment in my life where I drank way too much. And it wasn't that it's not that I went up there to dress nice and be a party boy. It was that at the moment I didn't realize that I was filling a void in my soul. So I thought I wanted to be a salesman. I thought I was really good at it, and oh boy, I have made it. But in that moment when I was shaking hands with the district manager, and he looked me in the face and said, "Are you going to do this again next year? Like, I better see you here next year." Of course, in the moment I was like, "You're going to see me here next year." When I walked away with that award to have my dinner, it just sunk in that I was completely unfulfilled. It sunk in how many hours I spent doing that, how much of my life I sacrificed to get to that moment. And basically I was told, go do it again. You better do it again. And also it was pretty lucrative, relatively speaking, but it really wasn't. It's not something that would ever make me millions unless I owned a car dealership. You know, I had a meeting with my general manager who told me point blank, you know, he makes what, 300,000 a year, some huge number. But he's like, I never see my kids. He's like, you need to think long and hard if that's what you want. And I kind of realized in that moment, talking to my general manager, that if I wanted the car industry, it wasn't getting promoted up, because it'd take me 20 years to get to be a general manager only to miss my kids' entire life. I realized around that time that I needed my name on the side of the building. So Hendrick Honda, right? It needs to be Narus Honda. Because Mr. Hendrick rolls in his Ferrari once a year to shake hands, have dinner, and tell everyone they're doing great. And then he drives back to Quail Hollow and hangs out with other multimillionaires, if not billionaires, right? So to me, I was like, what I really need is time freedom. And I achieved time freedom by having my name on the side of the building. But flashing back to hitting Honda Gold, what I realized then and there in that moment was how completely unsatisfying making decent money is, getting literally the highest award you can get out of the gate is. And at the time, at 24 years old, in the moment, I filled that void with alcohol. And I was totally embarrassed the next day. But it was one of those moments where I knew something was wrong in the moment, and I didn't know how to fix it. And it wasn't until a few years later, because I never hit that award again, by the way, because I tried to make I tried to have a life balance that I couldn't achieve selling cars. And it wasn't until I sprained my ankle playing basketball, where I was sitting at home with ice on my ankle, where I went, I am not going to make money today. I'm 20 something. I think it was maybe 25, 26 years old, not making money that day. And I went, I can't do this. And I went out and I bought crutches, and I went out to sell cars using crutches that same day, and just muscled through the pain. And it was really around that time where I realized I can do this in my 20s. It's annoying. If I get hurt when I'm in my 50s or 60s, or God forbid, I don't plan my retirement correctly and I'm working in my late 60s, I can't afford to not have a paycheck coming in if I get hurt. And so it was really the several pivotal moments where I realized, number one, I don't want to get promoted upwards at the car dealership. I can't really go out because a car sales experience doesn't really translate somewhere else directly. I would really have to start at the bottom of the rung. And I had gotten used to a lifestyle that is really hard to give up with, like I mentioned earlier, people that whether you really truly want what you think they want you to have, or whether you are just like falling victim to the pressure you think they're putting on you to live a certain lifestyle, it gets to you. And so I realized after a lot of reading, so I realized first and foremost, if it's not owning a car dealership, I need to own a business, period. Because I did a lot of introspection, and I went, I am meant to be my own boss. And also during this period, I realized I hate cars. What the heck am I doing here? I utterly hate cars. They're depreciating assets. It is a really bad investment. I love investments. I ended up getting my Series 7 one day because I loved it. And so I was like, I love investing. I love the idea of owning my own business. I love autonomy. I love the idea of time freedom. So I'm a guy who likes to work 80 hours a week, but then occasionally I like to work 20 hours a week. So I want that flexibility and know that money is coming in. And the only way to do that is to start a business. And so then I went, step one, self reflection, understand, self assess. Who am I? What do I like? Do I like my coffee completely black or do I like cream and sugar? Do I even like coffee? Am I a night owl? Am I an early bird? Like, who am I at my core? What am I really, truly passionate about? And it's as soon as you can answer that question, and even me, myself, after taking many, many years of asking myself very hard questions, I still cannot look you in the face and tell you I confidently know myself. So if you're listening in and you're like, I know myself, no, you don't. And it is really, 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 really painful, but it is worth it to just absolutely self-obliterate your self-esteem and then rebuild it with a proper foundation. And like Steve Jobs says, and a bunch of other people says, Warren Buffett too, your best word in your business repertoire is the word no. Because I looked at over 100 businesses. I even started a couple that didn't go anywhere. But because I said no to a lot of sexy opportunities that ultimately didn't fit who I was at heart, it made deciding things so much more efficient. So that when I eventually found mobile home parks, which is what I do full time now, it was, and my wife hates that I say this, but it was just like meeting her. The stars just aligned. I was like, oh my gosh, this is who I'm supposed to be with. Like when I met my wife, we clicked and we just knew that we were getting married, and very quickly. And we've been together 7 years now, and over 7 years now. And I absolutely am in love with her. And we are happier now than we've ever have been. And I knew that early on. And it was the same thing with mobile home parks. So sorry, sweetheart, I know you're listening to this. But you can't get there if you don't know who you are. And it's very similar to dating, right? Like you want to go after the thing that looks the best, or the most popular thing, or the thing that you think your friends are going to be most proudest about. And what you need to realize is it's not that. It's someone who really fits you like a glove and compliments you. So flashing back to the car dealership, I spent 4 years there. And then I decided, you know what I need to do? I need to get my MBA because I don't understand business. And this will allow me to pivot into another company. And I also realized too that at the car dealership, I was gaining amazing skills: how to sell, how to market, how to do operations, how to take a really angry customer when I am the bad guy because I'm the quote unquote scummy car salesman, and then have them and completely flip that on its head. Have them leave with the warm and fuzzy and go, next time I'm buying a car, I'm coming to Ryan and I'm sending my friends here, because he's not a car salesman. This is a professional. So learning how to do all of that and so much more were skills that I literally used this morning at my current business. So I realized that whatever job I was going to pivot into while I was going to start whatever company I was going to start, getting my MBA and taking another job would not. I can take something that even if I look at it and I'm like, well, that might be below me, I need to take it for the experience. And so I ended up going to work for Wells Fargo, which their leadership program, which taught me many great things. And I was very thankful for that opportunity. But I realized very quickly at that opportunity too, that I was not meant to do that. And thankfully, while I was getting my MBA, I had discovered mobile home parks. And I was a year into it when I started at Wells Fargo. So I hate to say that I had 1 foot in the door and 1 foot out, but basically what I was doing during that first full year is proving that mobile home parks could make me money. And then the second full year while I was at Wells Fargo, I needed to scale that up and also plan to go full time. So it took me 2 full years from discovering mobile home parks and 3 acquisitions to even go full time. And that's not to mention the 3 years I spent reading any book I could get my hands on. So I used to challenge myself to basically a book a week. And I've read well over 100 books, probably well over 200 books now. I definitely slowed that down a lot, like we were saying offline. But I forced myself to read. I forced myself to learn. I forced myself to network. And most importantly, I forced myself to self assess and understand who I am. So that way, when it was time to make the jump to full time, it was time for a sacrifice. And when I did that, finally, I cut my salary big time. So I pay myself $35,000 a year. $35,000 a year. I make more than that. But every penny above that, I force directly into my net worth. So it's like injecting steroids into my business, because every penny I make, since I'm an S corp, it only gets taxed once. So I'm funneling all that money into my business and not paying myself, but just a salary, right? And a measly one at that compared to what I probably could make in the open market. The reason is because it forces me to live a frugal lifestyle. So when I quit my job at Wells, I literally moved into a mobile home. What I realized was, and I lived there every other week for 14 months. So it wasn't like for a week, it was over a year. What I realized was, to get full time, I had to make a sacrifice. I had to cut some crazy expenses of mine that didn't truly make me happy. I had to live extremely frugally. I literally slept on a blow-up mattress. And I had 2 lawn chairs and a TV without a stand. It was literally leaning against my wall. And what I realized in that moment was, I could pay myself the property manager's salary. So all of a sudden, I could make $35,000 a year, be an owner of a business, and if I get lucky and I make a whole bunch more that year, I can funnel all that directly into the business, which I was lucky, and there's a lot of luck involved too, which I cannot stress enough. Luck and timing is completely out of your control and a huge part of it. But because I made that major sacrifice, that allowed me to get full time. And then the crazy thing about going full time in your side hustle is, out of seemingly nowhere, you will see opportunities everywhere. And you're like, oh my God, how did I miss this? And I will tell you how you missed it. It's because you're working 50 to 60 hours making someone else rich. And even if you're making 35,000 or less, or not paying yourself at all, like I think the founder of Nike didn't pay himself for like 10 years.
Yeah,
something like that.
He struggled until he went.
He struggled. Oh my goodness. And so you got to look at, for a lot of reasons, I've been very lucky. So for a lot of reasons, like you have to make a massive sacrifice. And I have to tell you, from the moment I quit Wells Fargo to today, I've been riding this high. That was June of 2017. It's now October of 2019. So it's been 2 years and change. And I am so happy not being in corporate America anymore. And I have a bunch of wonderful stories about achieving time freedom and how I've had my son, and how having time freedom has allowed me to literally be there for my premature baby's birth, which never would have happened if I had to request PTO or early paternity time, or get worried about being passed over for promotion, or worse, work a commission-only sales gig. So if you hear my story, and we're about to dive into this a little deeper, I'm excited to see what questions you have for me, by the way, because I've seen you take some pretty furious notes there. If you're listening to this, know that it's going to require the word sacrifice literally means, if you look it up, the definition inherently means you're giving up something valuable to you in the hopes that you're getting something more valuable in exchange, right? But inherently, it's going to hurt. And in some cases, a whole lot. But what you'll realize in very short order, once you destroy your self-esteem and rebuild it the right way from the ground up, not with lies, or not even lies. Lies is a bit of embellishment. It's really a hype story that other people are pitching to you, that they're perpetuating, and they don't necessarily know that it's not true. So it's not necessarily a lie. It's just that when you are, if you're the product of the 5 people you spend the most amount of time with, and your mom is a plumber, or your dad is a salesperson, like they're going to attack problems like a plumber or a salesperson, right? Like one of the best books I ever read, besides 4 Hour Work Week, which is an amazing book, by the way, was The Millionaire Next Door, because it makes you think like a millionaire. Like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, brilliant book. It makes you think like a millionaire. So if you don't come from money, because I didn't, I thought like a middle class person. So you have to think like a rich person. You have to make sacrifices. You have to self-assess, and you have to be patient, because it's not fair to say, oh, I found mobile home parks and it took 2 years, and then took another 2 years and change to get where I'm at now. It's not fair to say, well, in 2012, Ryan discovered he wanted to own his own business, and then 3 years later found mobile home parks. It's not fair to say that that time period was it, because before then I was developing skills, and before then I was getting degrees from universities, and before then I was self-assessing to a smaller degree and reading books. So it takes a lot of time. That's just not a sexy thing to say. And for someone who is stuck in a job that they're absolutely miserable at, because I was there more than once, it really sucks to hear. But you need to hear that, and you need to prepare yourself. Like Heidi Halvorson says in her book, Motivation, the people who are most successful are the slight optimists. They're the ones who go, oh, I'm going to do this, or the ones who go, oh, I'm never going to do this. It's the ones who go, I'm going to do this, but it's going to be really hard. So if you can have that mentality, you can look at it like it's a marathon, and you will be, like Bill Gates says, you will probably overestimate what is it? The quote is like, you'll overestimate what you can do in 1 year and underestimate what you can do in 10. And to end, before we go to questions, I'd like to say, made a LinkedIn post recently where I literally copied and pasted my goals. So the first meeting that my business partner and I had in July of 2015, our first meeting, we wrote down very specific goals with dates that we were to accomplish these goals by for a 5-year time horizon, and actually up to a 10-year time horizon. I copied those goals and I pasted them to LinkedIn, just a post. And I put where I'm at today, and I smashed all of them. So if you're listening to this and you're going, oh God, Ryan took 7 years to get to where he's at today from discovering he was meant to be an entrepreneur, I will tell you, it will go by a lot faster, and you will accomplish way more than you think you will, because there's a lot of time in a day, and there's a lot of time in a year. And even, I'll give you a good, for example, I'll make this my denouement. I do Duolingo every single day because it's been my life goal to speak Spanish. And I'm on like 855 days in a row or something like that. It's 15 minutes a day. And yo puedo hablar mucho español ahorita. I can speak Spanish now, not because, and it's not perfect, it's a disaster, but funciona is what we say. It works. And because I practice for 15 minutes every day, no matter what, in 2+ years, I'm basically fluent. If you ask my tenants, they'll laugh and they'll be like, "Es muy cómico, pero este hombre puede hablar español." So it's really funny, but this man can speak Spanish, right? So what I'm getting at with all of this, and where I'd kind of like to end and right off to the sunset for questions here, is a little bit every day goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we are going to dive in, because I love this. It's one thing that I love. Well, there's multiple things that I love in life, but when you find people who think like you and express themselves the way you do, and yet have completely different passions than you, it's exciting, right? Yeah. I would never feel like finding a mobile home park is like meeting my wife yet. However, what I do, but to be honest though, what I do right now is basically, that's how I feel about what I do right now. That my profession of helping people understand how money works. I am as in love with that as I am with my wife. And sometimes that's a struggle, because it's like, oh man, I wish that you'd love me more, right? That'd be nice, but really I love this in every fiber and core of my being. I love helping people understand money and prepare financially for their future. And I love what it does for my family on the income side. So like there's literally, yes, there's hard days. There's things that you don't love about your job. And there's probably stuff in the mobile home park when you have to evict somebody or you have to clean up a trashy site, right? There's obviously bad days, right? But it doesn't matter how bad that day is. I love every part of the bad as much as I love every part of the good. And finding, and that is, I love this. If I were to be a relationship coach, which I am on the money side, but not on the human side, right? But it's something that I've told all of my single friends who are and my siblings who are looking for a spouse, and something I learned through a lot of reading and stuff before. But when I was looking for a wife, I said, look, and this may be a little graphic for people who are whatever, just know. But when I was looking for a wife, I was like, look, I have to be able to like wake up in the morning and have sex with you. That's like something I got to be able to do, right? I can't marry somebody who I'm completely not attracted to. But attraction is a very small part of this equation for me. I'm looking for compatibility over attraction every day, all day. I'm looking for compatibility. If we're not compatible, I don't care how attractive you are, it will not make up for a lack of compatibility. And that is as true in relationships as Ryan pointed out, as it is in business, as it is in a career. If your career is not as like compatible with who you are, then it's not possible. So Ryan and I, we've just met briefly before we recorded this. I read his stuff, and he's probably seen me a little bit. I don't know if you picked this up or not, but my tagline, or one of the taglines that I use when I'm speaking on stage, is identify your identity. That is like the core of my message. It's the core of Fuel Your Legacy. I believe that your legacy is the enactment and the living of your identity. But first you have to identify your identity. And then the Fuel Your Legacy is a financial component of gaining the financial confidence to live your legacy regardless of the outcome, right? And that's where that sacrifice comes in. But that sacrifice is only possible after you know you're backed up against a wall and you know without a shadow of a doubt, this is my identity and I'm living it out and it's a gift to the world. And so I love that you recognize that your lifestyle that you had adopted had become part of kind of an identity that you had adopted, but not that you really like when you pulled back all the core, it wasn't really who you were.
Right.
And that is
I lived what you preach.
Yeah. I mean, it's so crucial to get to that point. And it is hard to hear. It is hard to say, okay, everything you believe about yourself, I need you to question everything, not leave anything stone unturned. Like I love how you said, like, what do I like with my coffee? Do I even like coffee, right? Literally question everything. How do I like to do my hair? Do I like to do my hair? What color do I like my hair, right? What type of clothes do I wear? Why do I wear these type of clothes? Do I want to, I mean, before we got on, I'm in a shirt and tie right now. He's in a polo. And he's like, man, should I go put a tie on? I feel underdressed. Like, dude, you just do you. I have a meeting, so I'm in a shirt and tie today, but like, just dress how you're comfortable. Like there's no reason to dress a way that you're not comfortable if it's inauthentic to you. And I love that. So I'm going to go way back to the beginning because I think this is another thing that is crucial. And I want to hear your thoughts on this. But you said something that I think only either an experienced person in human development or somebody who's just thought a lot about it, but you persuade people. And so many people think that a salesman is there to kind of be that sleazy person or manipulate them. So how would you define the difference between persuasion and manipulation?
I really don't think there's a lot of difference. I know that's probably not what people want to hear, but manipulation is basically, in layman's terms, doing things to affect someone's behavior to get what you want out of them, right? And persuasion is really a form of manipulation. But at the same time, I think persuasion comes with a lot of negative connotations in that you think you're just going to wave a magic wand and persuade someone. And the truth is, outside of a cult leader, that's not really something that happens. Unless you're lying to someone, there's persuasion. You're really not going to, it's really hard to actually be that charismatic that you're going to convince someone to do something against their will. Right? So in other words, in car sales, so I sold Hondas. The reason why I picked Honda is, number one, I drove the product and I believed in the product. And also it carries its value. It doesn't break. It lasts forever. I have a 2009 Honda Fit stick shift. Love it to death. 150,000 miles on it. I'm going to keep it as long as the thing goes. I've paid it off a long time ago. It's cheap. It's great on gas. Like, dude, that's easy to sell, right? Because when people come in, oh, I don't want to make the wrong decision. Dude, I've had this now I've had it for 10 years, right? Like, if you're looking to have something reliable that's going to hold its value and be cheap but safe, like, no brainer, right? So what you're doing in a sale is you're presenting the facts in a way that allows someone to make their own decision. Now, you have things like strategic omissions where you might leave out that it's not as comfortable as the Toyota, right? So, like, I'm not going to just volunteer that information, or maybe you do. So, like, there's a lot of gray area in sales, which kind of opens the way for you to lie. And so my thing was, when I got into car sales, I was like, I'm going to do this the right, like, I'm not going to be a scummy car salesman. One of two things is going to happen. I'm either going to go do this honestly, and the whole world is just going to implode and it's not going to work, or it's going to work and it's going to wow people because they're going to be like, oh my God, a car sale. Like, if someone asked me, like, what's more comfortable, a Toyota or Honda? I'm going to tell you the truth. The Toyota, if you want to ride a couch, go get a Toyota. But here's the thing. If you want to feel like you have more control of your car, you pick a Honda, right? So in other words, like, persuasion to me, is it manipulation? Yes, it is. But manipulation doesn't necessarily have to be nefarious, right? So for example, towards the end of my years at Honda, Toyota got rocked with safety issues. I mean, rocked with safety issues. And it wasn't just the car pedal thing getting stuck. It was, they failed a really big test. And I can't remember what it was, but I remember showing people, like, hey, look, just FYI, Toyotas are great cars. They hold their value, but just FYI, here is a serious issue that Toyota has that they have not addressed yet. And it's funny, even though I was presenting the fact in a way that was knocking down my competition, people didn't like that. I ended up just not even bringing it up, period. And I think the takeaway there is, manipulation doesn't necessarily have to be nefarious, right? So in that instance, I was like, hey, this is literally a safer car. Check these third-party sources, right? So am I manipulating someone for my own self-gain? Yeah, absolutely. I want to sell you a Honda and not have you buy a Toyota. However, it's safer for you to buy this Honda right now, at least, right? So in other words, it doesn't always have to come with nefarious connotations. And kind of where I also think it's important to make note of, if your incentives are aligned with your prospective buyers, that's everything, right? So in other words, it becomes nefarious and deleterious for someone in a situation where they're being persuaded, where it doesn't incentivize them to buy whatever you're selling, right? Say you're selling some snake oil, right? And truly, in the bottom of your heart that the snake oil doesn't do anything, right? But the person trying to buy it is seeing something that's not really there. And you are allowing them to see that. And you are planting seeds there, whether you're being truthful or not, whether you're omitting key details or you're directly lying to them. If somebody is looking at a story that you're telling and they are buying that story, even though it's not true, that is a really bad thing. But even still, like, that person is actively wanting to believe in something. So if you're a critical thinker, and like you said, you ask really tough questions of yourself and of your surroundings, even if it is really hard to ask those questions, you're never going to get persuaded unless someone directly lies to you. And even then, trust but verify, man. Always check the facts.
Yeah, agree. In my mind, I would say kind of the difference between, if I had to separate the two words, I would say manipulation is more of a malintent, and persuasion is to help people get what they need. And it really comes down to what is your intention, and are your values aligned? Are your values aligned with the buyer, or are they not? If they're not, and you're still trying to get them to buy something, at that point, exactly, I would say it's more like manipulation. It's malintent. Whereas persuasion, it's a fine line, right? Because you're employing the same technique. So to use a story from my past, I did door-to-door sales for 5 years, 4.5 years. And I did it 1 year, and then I went out and I served a 2-year mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And when you're talking about Jesus Christ, the last thing you want to do is like sell somebody Jesus Christ, right? Because maybe they're going to join for the wrong reasons and all this.
Right.
There's some ethical things there that for me, I was like, I don't want to sell them this, but I had learned all of these sales tools on door-to-door sales, and happened to be that I knocked a lot of doors on my mission. And so a lot of the skills and tactics were applicable to both situations. And I would go through kind of ups and downs where I would be using the sales tools and tactics, but I felt kind of dirty using them because I didn't want to sell somebody the Jesus Christ. But on the other hand, when I wouldn't use them, I felt like I was not giving them the best opportunity to see Jesus Christ in the best light. And so part of it is you're using these skills. These are skills you've been given, and it's okay to be persuasive. That I think it comes down to what's your intent in being persuasive. Because part of, and this is where I would separate a salesman from a closer, right? And a salesman is somebody who is there really just with their own pocketbook in mind, and they're how much money can I get out of this person, and they're just selling them anything. And then a closer, their objective is not to sell them something as much as to get a yes or a no and help their client make a decision. If they can help their client make a decision, yes or no, everybody wins, right? Most of the time, the client really respects that and will actually buy from you just because you were objective about the whole process, rather than going, even though they probably could get something or they might have liked the Toyota better in the end, right? Out of respect for knowing that you are living in alignment, that they'll do business with you because they can trust at that point. Where a salesman, they always feel like, okay, what's he not telling me? What's he trying to do just to get my pocketbook? And I think that that's an important distinction, especially when we're going to start talking about kind of how you grew your business and how you overcame some different challenges. That's an important thing to understand, where you're coming from and the intention behind what you're doing. And I think to really identify that, you have to go in and identify your identity, do that self-assessment, and start thinking about those things.
If you're lying to yourself, you're going to lie to other people, whether you realize you're doing it or not.
Yep. And I say all the time, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. And to further that example, I mean, this is just great, our conversation. But before we started recording, Ryan was
I literally just told him to hit record because our conversation was awesome.
It was so good. So I was telling him that sometimes if I've read 3/4 or half or a quarter of a book and I feel like I've got the main idea and it's just becoming repetitive and multiple stories of the same to teach the same principle, I will stop a book halfway. Like I'm not committed to finishing a book just because I need to finish a book for my own, like to see the finish bar on my Audible. Like if I've got it, I'm moving on. Where he's like, man, if I open a can of beer, I've got to finish my can of beer. And so we chuckled and he said, maybe that's a bad thing. And I think, no, there's advantages to both mentalities depending on what angle you're taking at. But I think the commitment to finish, that commitment applied everywhere in his life. And it's about what is he finishing. For him, it was about finishing, identifying his identity and continue to live in accordance with his identity. And he's not going to be satisfied until that's completed. And he already told you he's still working on it. He doesn't know exactly who he is, and he doesn't think you do either. And I would agree. I'm fairly confident with who I am. Like I can function knowing who I am, but I'm still questioning everything I believe every day. And I'm seeking to have associations with people who question everything I believe, from a religious aspect, a business aspect, to where I'm uncomfortable. I really disagree with some people. I'm maybe get a little bit angry about other people's opinions, but I put myself in those situations voluntarily because I want the challenge. I want to grow, and I'm not satisfied until I've completed my growth. And so it's just an interesting thing to think about. And then see, I want to touch on one other thing before we go further, but there's this thing that you talked about, and I wonder what's the emotional thought process. You kind of
Sure.
talked about it, but when you realize that your time is worth more, your life is worth more. So many people that are working and they think, it's okay, like I'm surviving. But how do you value your life? How did you get to the point where you're like, okay, my life is worth more than this job, and I'm done with this job because my life, the actual experiences that I could operate or have, are worth more than this income?
So I mentioned earlier one thing I challenged myself to do is meet everyone I could. Right? Everyone says, "Oh, it's all about who you know." Like it's not what you know, it's who you know. Everybody knows that, but almost no one applies that in their life. So I was like, okay, if this is a true axiom of wisdom of those passed down through the many years, like let's see if there's any credence to this. So I talk to anybody with a pulse. I don't care if you're a janitor or a CEO or anywhere in between. I wanted to talk to you. And that's still true today. I'll talk to anybody. Like, it's a big reason why I want to come on here too, by the way. Like, I want to give people free content so they can escape corporate America too. Like, I'm not selling anything. I'm not raising any funds for my properties. I literally just want to help people. But also, like, what's in it for me? Well, I'll tell you what's in it for me. Hopefully someone listening now will go, I need to get on the phone with this guy, even if I don't offer him anything. And I want that because I want to hear you. I want to understand your thought process. And I've met thousands of people in my life, thousands. And it's amazing how everyone is unique, yet everyone is very average. And it's until you realize how average that you are, where you realize, like, if you're a fan of The Office, like I am, I love Michael Scott as a character. He has this one episode which is hysterical, where he promised a bunch of kids that he was going to pay for their college. And then they graduated, and then they're like, hey, Michael Scott, where's our money? Hilarious episode. And obviously he doesn't have the money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so someone asked him, like, why would you promise that you were going to pay all these kids college 10 years ago? And his answer was, well, 10 years ago, I figured by now I'd be a millionaire. And as funny as that is, it is so true across the board. So many people are like, I'm going to be rich one day. And when you ask them, they joke, oh, the lottery. Or I'm going to get a promotion, or this is going to happen, or that's going to happen. And no one wants to actually take the steps and to do that, right? And it's not at your job. Unless you're crazy, unless you're LeBron James, right? Unless you're like the 1% of the 1% athletic or smart or anything. Like, just think about basic statistics. If you want to be in the 1% of wealth, you need to be 1% good at something. You either need to be 1% good looking, or 1% smart, or 1% hardworking, or 1% lucky, right? You're not just going to get into the 1% because you exist. Even if you're in the 90th percentile, that's not the 1%, right? So what I realized is, well, what's a really easy thing to be 1% in? Be 1% in what no one else is willing to do. So for me, it was easy. For me, it was like, let's go meet everyone in the world, because that's a really basic truth. Like, go meet everyone you can. And I've met some incredible people. And go and do things like literally live in a mobile home. And in my industry, everyone wants to syndicate money and put deals together. No one actually wants to operate their deals. And not only do they not want to operate, they don't even want to go to their properties. Literally 2 hours ago, I was sitting in one of my properties. I go almost every day if I can to my properties. And for a long time, I was the physical property manager before I was able to start really hiring people. And it's like, you need to be able to do those things to do that. So getting back to, I think ultimately where you're getting at there is like, emotionally, how do you get there? Well, step one is you have to, like you mentioned earlier, you have to understand that no matter what you pick in life, there are going to be awful things about it. Like The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F by Mark Manson, where he's like, dude, any any job you pick is going to come with a pile of crap. You just have to pick the pile of crap that, you can live with every day. And um, for me, it's that I knew I wanted to do real estate. It just fits my skill set really well, and I knew I wanted to help charity somehow, and more specifically, I knew I wanted to help underprivileged kids. And name a better way to help underprivileged kids than to literally help give them a clean, safe place to live. I started a partial scholarship. I offer to pay for college applications. I do free food giveaways. I try my best to help remove the stress from these families so the kids can focus on their school. And for me, that helps me through really bad days because I have a lot of really, really bad days. But ultimately, it's like this, man. I want to talk to everyone I can talk to, and if you're listening in, I recommend you do the same because you never know who you're going to meet, and it could be a janitor that gives you the best information of your life. You never know, and you got to find a way to really escape the fear. A great book I could recommend is Susan Jeffers' "Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway." And really, what that book kind of taught me is that, like, that and 4 Hour Work Week, it's really like, dude, imagine the worst case scenario. It's really not that bad. Like, if you vividly imagine the worst case scenario, you're going to survive. And that's the point, not to be a spoiler on Susan Jeffers, because that book is full of amazing things. But her big thing was right out of the gate, she's like, fear basically comes from thinking you can't handle a situation. So convince yourself you can handle it.
Yep.
Then
Persuade
magically
yourself you can.
Exactly. And it's like courage. It's not you. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is feeling the fear and doing it anyway, to literally quote her book.
Mm-hmm. And I completely agree. So how did you, when you decided to quit, I mean, it sounds like from timeline, if I got everything right, you got married 3 or 4 years before you quit your job completely, correct?
I got married in November of 2015, which was a couple months after discovering mobile home parks, and it was about a year and a half before I went full time.
Okay. So about a year and a half. So one thing that a lot of people face when they try and move from corporate America into entrepreneurship, everybody faces it. If it doesn't come from outside, it comes from inside. Tell me the story of your biggest naysayer and how you silenced them in your mind and said, look, I'm doing it anyways.
Oh man, there's a lot. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people in corporate America. One guy laughed at me and was like, "You're going to go be a real estate agent. You're going to leave this at the Wells Fargo leadership program."
The one that's getting investigated by our government? Yeah, that one.
Oh, yeah. I don't want to say bad things about Wells Fargo. I think I had a bad Wells. I think I was in a bad culture at Wells. There's a lot of folks at Wells that I know that just absolutely love it. So I think I was just unlucky in that regard. But there's again, when my wife listens to this, she'll get really mad. But one thing that I think needs to be said is that whether some of the closest people to you may be the biggest naysayers. I'm not saying that my wife was not supportive or that she was a naysayer, so to speak, but there are a lot of things that she was saying and doing that she will, if she was here to defend herself, she would be like, that's not fair. I didn't know what I was doing at the time. But she grew up like lower upper class. So like if I was like upper middle class, she was like lower upper class. So like country club, big house. Meanwhile, I was like middle class. My dad's a college professor. My mom's a salesperson, good income, get private school. Wake Forest is private. So like I wasn't rich by any means, but we're definitely middle class. But her parents were, I don't want to say really wealthy, but they were definitely over that threshold of being considered coming from wealth. So when I rolled home and was like, guess what? I've got amazing news. I found the one. I found it. Found the one I'm meant to be with. It's mobile home parks. She said a lot of really bad words in a very elevated tone of voice. And I think that, and I don't want to say that she was a naysayer saying I couldn't do it, because she never said I couldn't do it. She was more like, you are thrusting our family and our future into literally recourse debt. In other words, if one of my properties goes belly up, they are coming after all of my assets. So I have full recourse debt over myself on my properties. So in other words, Ryan, you are going to put our family into full recourse debt on like to a certain degree, a trash can, which I hate to say it. I'm supposed to say modular home communities, but a lot of people have looked at me and been like, why are you you're buying garbage cans? Which I think is a horrible thing to say, but I get it if you come from a country club lifestyle, right? Mm-hmm. So number one, you're taking out recourse debt. Number two, you're going to pay yourself nothing, right? $35,000 a year. I wasn't, for the first 2 years, I lost money. Well, for the first year, I lost money. The second year, I made money, but I didn't pay myself anything. So I really lost money. And then the third year, I pay myself $35,000, and then where I'm in the fourth year and change, I'm still on purpose paying myself $35,000 a year. So from her perspective, this is awful, and she has no say. I basically in a really awful way was like, "You're being a dream killer." It's a really horrible thing for me to say, but I think this is a story that people need to hear, because when you have a significant other that loves you and wants to build a life with you, and you basically come home one day unannounced and you're like, this is what I'm dedicating my life to. That's a really crappy thing to do, especially when you're going to follow up by calling her a dream killer. So I did a lot of really lame things, and she will tell you first and foremost publicly that she did a lot of really lame things too. We actually recorded it on my podcast. I literally gave her the mic and I was like, you know what? Say whatever you want. 2 rules. No bad words and no giving away any of my secrets. And I let her just rail on me for like 10 minutes. And then it's like a 15-minute episode. In the last 5 minutes, we just kind of have a cute little back and forth where we basically together talk about marriage through the lens of entrepreneurship. So ultimately, who's my biggest naysayer? I don't know. I'm a person who hates losing. I'm really competitive, and winning to me is not nearly as much fun as not losing. If that kind of makes sense. Like the magnitude of emotion I feel when I win dwarfs the magnitude of the pain I feel when I lose. So it was really tough the first year from someone who was my best friend and my spouse, right? And so the reason why I say that, because my wife is going to get really mad when she hears that I told this story. But sweetie, we have that episode, so you kind of asked for it. The reason why I want to say that is I know that there are listeners to this episode right now who have a significant other who, for whatever reason, hasn't bought in yet or has given them a lot of flack. I will tell you, you are not alone. And if you truly know in your heart that you are meant to do something, you will find a way to persevere through that. And if that person, that significant other, is meant to be there with you, you will find a way to get through it together and come out even better. Because at the end of that episode, we were both like, yeah, we love each other more now than we did going into this. So I think those are all really, it's kind of lame for me to basically pick my spouse to answer that question. But the truth is, I think people need to hear that, man. I really do. And you can, if you know yourself and you found the spouse that, like you said earlier, you want to have sex with, but also fits who you are at heart, and you want to build something together, and they're truly supportive, right? They're going to stand by you even if they fundamentally hate what you're getting into.
Yep. I completely agree. I was fortunate enough to, when I was dating, I already had found what I was doing for eternity, right? Before I got married. So that was it was kind of baked into the cake. However, I will say that over the last year and a half, I've really ramped up a lot of my public speaking, a lot of my traveling, and it's hard. It's definitely been a topic of conversation in our marriage of saying, okay, well, how can we manage this? She thought she would love being a mom. She doesn't really love being a mom, which is hard because she also doesn't necessarily want to go earn all the income. So it's like, okay, well, how do we balance that? There's still responsibilities that have to be done. Now we have 2 kids. We can't really send them back. So it is a management thing. And it's not necessarily, I think what you said is actually probably the most raw and real. These people love you, and you potentially are bringing them into something that they didn't feel like they signed up for. And there are definitely better ways to deliver that message and to get the buy-in.
Absolutely.
Drop an anvil on their head and say, well, look, baby, join me or get out, right?
Exactly.
And so with that, though, I love all of this. We're going to have you on again, because this is not not enough time to have this conversation. And we're going to talk a little bit after this about some things that I think we might be able to work together on.
Awesome.
It sounds like we have some similar missions, but I'm going to go through, there's 2 more sections here. Well, first, how can we support you? How can we get in touch with you? If we did want to have a phone call with you, where would we reach out to you to kind of hear more of your story or share our gratitude for you being so vulnerable?
Yeah, absolutely. So literally just Google me. My name is Ryan Narus, Narus. That's N like Nancy. LinkedIn is probably the best place to find me. Second best place is my website, archimedesgrp.com. You can drop me a line on either place. I'm pretty much so a wide open door. I have a lot of people that reach out to me that are like, hey, can I buy you coffee, or can I take you out to lunch, or this or that? And it's like, dude, honestly, I just want to meet you. Like, how does it benefit me? Literally just getting on the phone with you. I want to hear who you are. I want to hear your story. I want to know where you came from, where you're at, and where you want to go. And I really thoroughly enjoy teaching. I really thoroughly enjoy helping. I really thoroughly enjoy connecting. So offline, when Samuel and I were talking, I literally thought of 2 people I would love to introduce him to. That's who I am. And if I have you in my database, then I can connect people to you and you to people. And I love that. So like I said, I'm not selling anything. I don't have a fund. I'm not actively looking for investors. I'm not self-promoting for anything. I literally just want to help people, because I have to tell you, being stuck at a job is torture. It's literally torture. From quitting to like 6 to 12 months after quitting corporate America, I lost something like 15 pounds, and I changed none of my habits. I was that depressed.
It's true.
So if I can help people, because I don't think, you could argue like AI is going to come in and take over thought jobs, and automation is going to take over thought jobs, so we need to reinvent jobs going forward. Yeah, you can make that argument, but truth be told, go find your happiness. Because I got to tell you, when my son was born premature, being able to be there by my wife's side, she was in the hospital for almost a week, and then my son in the hospital for over 2 weeks in the NICU. To be there by their side when they needed me the most, and to not have to worry about work, that was worth I don't care if someone was like, I'll give you $1 million to miss this moment. I would never take it. Like, to be there at 3:45 p.m. on a Thursday in the middle of a work week to watch my son be born, that was the most amazing experience of my life. Why? There is no amount of money you could ever give me that would make me forego that experience. So to me, it's like what I am, like, you are helping me by allowing me to help you, because I want you to achieve that. So please reach out to me. I mean that. Again, Ryan Narus, Narus, archimedesgrp.com. Find me on LinkedIn. Connect with me. I'd love to.
Okay. So this might, I encourage everybody to reach out to him. I'm so grateful that I get to know him. I'm excited to connect with the people that he's mentioned to me offline. And like I say, I really think there's some potential there for us to even work closer together. This is my last 2 sections here, and they're kind of my favorite. So we're doing legacy on rapid fire. It's 5 questions. I'm probably only going to ask you 4 of them, though. And 1 word to 1 sentence answers.
Cool.
Okay. The only caveat to that is this first question you must clarify. Okay. And you'll understand that when I ask it, because everybody seems to, especially these more enlightened people that I've been talking to, everybody answers it the same. And I'm like, okay, expound. Okay. So here goes. What do you believe is holding you back from reaching the next level of your legacy today?
Time. And I'll expand on that. I think that the concept that I have works. So I've bought 10 mobile home park. I've been a part of 10 mobile home park transactions now. So far, I've made a ton of mistakes along the way, but truth be told, it's going to take a lot. You can't just go to a mobile home park store and buy a bunch of good mobile home park deals. The industry is flooded right now with people trying to enter the space. So there's not a lot of good deals out there, period. And even if there were, I wouldn't want, my time is limited. So number one, it's like planting seeds. the limiting factor there is time. You plant the seed and then you watch it grow, but you have to wait. If I buy a great deal today, it's not like I make a bunch of money today. I will make the money when I sell or refinance, and I'll get cash flow along the way. But you buy a property and the big jumps in your IRR and the money that hits your bank account come after many months or many years after you've executed a turnaround. So for me, the limiting factor is absolutely time.
Okay, awesome. And what is the hardest thing you've ever accomplished?
Meeting my wife.
Okay.
I was abysmal with women. I was horribly annoying, unlikable, and it took me years of my life to learn how to talk to people. And my wife, literally, I met her at the car dealership. She showed up to buy a Honda. She ended up buying a Volvo. So I was not manipulative. I was persuasive in another light. But yeah, I was just god awful with women, and I taught myself how to speak to people, and through getting proficient with interacting with people, when my wife presented herself, everything fell apart. It fell into place so easily for the both of us to get married and to grow our lives together.
Awesome. And what's the greatest success then to this point in your life?
Other than my son, I would say escaping corporate America. I mean, that's more than getting my black belt in karate or hitting Honda Gold or getting a master's degree or teaching myself Spanish. If you are listening to this and you think you are meant to be your own boss and to escape corporate America, I am telling you, you are right. And it is on par with getting married and having a child. It is amazing.
Awesome. And what is one secret you believe has contributed most to your success throughout your journey? Habit, mindset, or behavior?
Oh, so many things, man. Habits are everything. But I think self-assessment is got to be the most important thing there. The 1% rule that I talked about earlier, where you've got to find your 1%, is really huge. But I mean, if I have to pick one and only, it's like I mentioned earlier, life is a marathon, man. You will do a lot. You will overestimate what you do in a year and underestimate what you do in 10.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And then, so that's the end of that section. This is my favorite section. Okay. This is actually, this question is why I do this podcast.
Okay.
Okay. So we're going to pretend that you are dead. So your family's sad now, but 6 generations from now, your great grandchildren, they're sitting around a table. They're discussing your life, Ryan. They're discussing your legacy. They're having this conversation. What do you want your great grandchildren, what do you want them to be saying about your legacy in 6 generations from now?
I want them to be saying, I'm glad he taught us to leave the world better than you showed up. So for me, I don't want to divulge how much I'm worth, but it went from effectively negative to a lot. And it's because I take that mentality into my properties, right? So I want to buy something at or above appraisal value. So in other words, I'm happy to pay an unfair price advantage seller because I know that I'm going to make that property better off for having been there. And the reason why I mentioned my scholarship and paying for college applications and doing things like Bible studies on my properties and going to my properties and talking to people face to face is because I want the people on my properties to be better off for having been there. It's really easy to be like, wow, I hope in 6 generations I've amassed so much, like I'm the Vanderbilts, right? So they have wealth and they can do what they want and not worry about money ever. But the thing of it is, studies show that by the 3rd generation, most wealth is gone. And I have a friend who's 3rd generation wealthy, and he's told me multiple times, he's like, I am breaking this. I'm going to be abnormal here. I am going to continue my family's wealth. He's a wicked ambitious guy, right? There are a lot of people that once you hit that 3rd iteration, that's gone. And not only is that gone, but I think I possibly hit a really big milestone in my life today, depending on how you value my properties. because net worth is kind of like a moving target. So it's like, if I had all my money in the stock market, I could tell you to the penny how much I'm worth, but I'm not. I own real estate, so it's a range. But I think I hit a really big milestone yesterday, and I can't tell you how underwhelming it is. Wealth is cool for like 30 seconds. Like I called my best friend. I was like, hey, dude, guess what? And I called my wife, and I called one of my other really close friends. Other than that, I really haven't told anyone else, and I really don't care to, because honestly, I really don't care. What I care about is, actually, I have it right over there, is a card I got from Miss Joyce in one of my properties. So she had bed bugs, and her furniture got completely ruined. And this was years before I bought the property. And she ended up having to buy a blow-up mattress for $50 to sleep on. And then when she realized at 70 years old she couldn't do that anymore, she went out to a rent-a-center, which just absolutely took her to the cleaners. And she still had a balance years later. And I went and I surprised her. I was like, Miss Joyce, you know why I'm here? I'm going to pay off this bed for you. I'm going to do it with my own funds. And she could not, every time I talk to her now, she still can't believe it. And she even wrote me a card, and it's the sweetest thing ever. I made an impact in her life, however small, or to her, however big and unexpected. In 6 generations, I want to do so much good in my life that 6 generations from now, people are going to look, my kids are great grandkids are going to look back and be like, this guy talked the talk, walked the walk, and he was so happy. Not because he made a bunch of money, not because he got his black belt in Haitian Ryu Karate or taught himself Spanish. No, he is happiest because he found a way to help a lot of people. And I want that. So if I do anything for my son, and hopefully I have more kids and I get to live a nice long life, hopefully I inspire a lot of other people to realize the fact that money doesn't buy you happiness. It buys you relief from things that will make you unhappy. So like, for example, there's this famous study that came out a couple of years ago that once you make 70,000 USD, anything above that's not going to make you happier. And there's a reason for that. It's because when you're worried about your like defaulting on your mortgage or where am I going to pay for my medicine? Like once that worry is removed, having more money isn't going to make you happy. But let me tell you something. Helping someone in a really meaningful and impactful way is amazing. And if I can instill that for generations in my family, that don't listen to other people who on Instagram who try to pretend like they have really sexy significant others and they live this crazy lavish lifestyle and they're so happy. Don't believe that hype. The truth is, go help someone and that will truly make you happy. So I hope that in many years from now, people will look back on my life and be like, this guy had it right. And I'm so glad he helped others and made this world a better place for having been in it. And I'm going to follow his example and do the same for my life. And my life is going to be fundamentally better because I help others.
Yeah, I love that. I'm so excited to be your friend. I consider you a friend.
In my network. In our each other's network.
Yeah, and I'm excited to continue more of this conversation offline. But that is it for today, guys. If you found value in this, please go on to iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you're listening, and leave a review. Go follow Ryan and listen to his podcast, especially those who are struggling with their spouse. And go listen to that podcast with him and his wife and kind of gain some perspective. I think that's the biggest thing, is gain some perspective. I love this. Thank you so much for sharing your time, your talents, and your mind with us today. And we will catch you guys next time on Fuel Your Legacy. Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me. And if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.